Hey again, it's been quite a while since I did a video about the single car, which was the McLaren F1, the greatest supercar of the 20th century. This beautiful Corsa red Ferrari Enzo Ferrari is one of the most iconic supercars of the 2000s and one of the best supercars ever. This Enzo Ferrari is officially 20 years old as of 2022, which is the same age as me, and that's crazy to believe. This legendary supercar for sure has barely aged in terms of design and still looks astonishing by today's standards. Not only did the car age well, but the Enzo remained one of the fastest supercars on the planet today, with a powerful mid-mounted naturally aspirated engine and uses lots of F1 technology that made it way ahead of its time. But the Enzo is not just a supercar that goes fast, it's deeply, much more than that. There are many reasons why the Enzo outshines its inheritor, the LaFerrari, and its precursor, the F50. It has been 20 years now since this gem of a car came out and has been deemed to be the most important Ferrari of all time. Once every decade, Ferrari comes out with a car that takes the supercar world by miles and sets a benchmark like no other car in the car industry. The first car made by Ferrari to start their supercar program was the 288 GTO, released in 1984, and was the first Ferrari race car that was built to be road legal since the 250 GTO and was designed for Group B racing. Soon after, it evolved into the legendary F40, giving birth to the ultimate 1980 supercar rivalry, which was the last car Enzo Ferrari himself worked on before he passed away in 1988. It was the first production car to have a full carbon fiber body to hit 200 miles per hour and was built to celebrate Ferrari's 40th anniversary. Then came the F50 in the mid-90s, which was a faster car back then but fairly controversial. Following the successful F50 was the legendary Enzo, named directly after the brand's founder himself, Enzo Ferrari. Like every other Ferrari supercar, there was a limited production run of only 400 Enzos made, making it one of the rarest cars in the world. Each one of them is special in its terms. The Enzo was launched in 2002 in Maranello, Italy, and went into production in 2003 and 2004. You couldn't just walk up to any dealership to buy one. It was only made available to existing clients, those who owned a Ferrari F40 and F50. The Enzo got a starting price of around $660,000 when launched. Today, the Enzo is now sold worldwide for between $2 and $3 million, which is wildly expensive. The Enzo is a very special car, and there are many things to fill in that makes this so special. Technically, the Enzo is referred to as the F60. Ferrari initially was going to name it the F60, but then gave the car a spiffier name in memory of the company's founder, Enzo Ferrari. Before I get into about the engine, chassis, performance, etc., let's start with how the Enzo was designed. The Ferrari Enzo had a completely new design that was never seen on any Ferrari until then. It was designed by Pininfarina's chief designer Ken Okuyama at the time. When you look at his predecessor, the F50 was a design masterpiece and an evolution over the F40. Well, the Enzo didn't share much of any design cues from those two Ferraris at all. Ferrari took it to the next level. The goal was to create a modern classic F1 based supercar and bring in F1 technology to the road. Okuyama sketched and designed an F1 inspired front with a pointy nose ahead of the long V-shaped front lid that can be seen in the images. The front air vents on the bumper resemble an F1 car's front splitter. There were two more vents on each side of the front hood for better cooling of the engine. The headlight design also gives the Enzo a distinctive look. On the sides, the Enzo gets butterfly doors as any other supercar and two large vents on each side for more intake along with large side skirts. The Enzo has four round taillights from the F50 with a large carbon diffuser flanked by four exhausts, two on each side. Apart from other Ferrari supercars, the Enzo didn't need a rear wing at all because most of the downforce is produced by the underbody ground effects. However, it has a small aero rear spoiler that pops up at higher speeds or under braking to keep the back planted. The Enzo's engine was a completely new V12 design that drew on Ferrari's Formula One experience and as a result had some unique technical solutions. It had 4 valves per cylinder, dual overhead camshaft, and a variable valve timing system. The Enzo was powered by a 6-liter naturally aspirated V12 delivering 660 horses, 484 pound-feet of torque, and can redline up to a screaming 8,200 RPM. Those were huge numbers deemed in the early 2000s for a supercar. All that power is transferred to the back wheels. With these kinds of power and gearbox interact, the Enzo with a curved weight of only 2,766 pounds or 1,255 kilograms. Thanks to the carbon fiber chassis and new technology making the car much lighter and stronger than the F50. The overall design was very appreciated by people in the supercar world, and even after 20 years, it still looks very modern and fairly new. The Enzo housed the fastest, most sophisticated engine and technology at the time. Moreover, it featured a 6-speed Formula 1 derived dual clutch transmission, which is capable of quick gear shifting in 150 milliseconds for its time. Ferrari lifted that gearbox from the winning Ferrari F2002 F1 car, and the Enzo even utilized tech that wasn't even allowed in Formula 1. It was the first road-going Ferrari model to ever have active aerodynamics to produce ultimate downforce at any given time, a tech that's now become commonplace on modern hypercars. It made the Enzo Ferrari the most aerodynamically advanced and one of the most amazing handling cars at the time. Likewise, the Enzo came at the time just before onboard computers, driving aids, and hyper systems were coming to be popular, which makes it one of the rawest, the last purely mechanical hypercar, and the last non-electrically assisted supercar on Earth. The Enzo wasn't crammed with tons of electronics or hybrid tech and came from a golden era of millennial supercars. There was a time in the season when enthusiasts were eager to the realm of powerful and great sounding naturally aspirated engines in supercars from the 2000s. Back then, the Ferrari Enzo was the fastest street-going Ferrari for a decade until the LaFerrari hypercar, and to this day still is one of the top 3 fastest naturally aspirated Ferraris ever, with the likes of both the LaFerrari and 812 Superfast, which also have naturally aspirated engines. The Enzo achieves an impressive 0 to 60 mph time in literally 3.1 seconds, then slaps a quarter mile at 11 seconds, and gets a top speed of 221 mph or 354 kilometers an hour. That's just as fast as the decade newer Lamborghini Veneno. Goes to show that the Enzo remains at par with modern day supercars. It was like the fastest hypercars of the 2000s, and faster than its 2K rivals. Cars like the Porsche Carrera GT, Pagani Zonda, Lamborghini Murcielago, and Mercedes McLaren SLR, to name a few, are some of the great cars from that era. With the lightweight chassis, traction control, active aero, and carbon ceramic brakes, the Enzo proved by becoming the fastest production car on the Nürburgring with a record of 7-minute and 25-second lap time that was set in 2008 while a test conducted by Evo magazine. It was quicker than the rest of its rivals, but was slower than the Maserati MC12, Enzo's twin sibling, which was built using Enzo's platform. One of the main things most people who've heard of the MC12 know is that it's based on a Ferrari Enzo, using the same chassis and the same V12 engine. It was more than just a rebodied Enzo, and designed for race competition to be a GT1 race car, with street legal homologation necessary to make its race car form legal for competition. Due to this, the MC12 is sometimes nicknamed the second generation Ferrari Enzo. On the other hand, the Ferrari Enzo was built to be an uncompromising hypercar with the F1 derived technologies of its day for the streets. If you were to show the Ferrari Enzo to someone who didn't know about it and stared at it really hard, their first thoughts will be, how is this car road legal? Especially with those deep curves and front pointy V-nose inspired by the Formula 1 cars. Not to mention, it is basically an F1 car and a street hypercar that had a baby, and no one would even think the design is 20 years old. When it comes to the inside of the car though, the interior is filled with a race car DNA for the road, with race bucket seats, race belt harnesses, and pedal shifting mounted behind the steering wheel. The steering wheel was very complex and filled with race car-like features at anyone's fingertips. Also gets F1 shift lights to indicate when to shift gears as in the Formula 1 car. The dashboard has air conditioning vents and an instrumental cluster that has a mixture of both analog and digital displays, while the center console was kept basic and gets the big red engine start button. Other things were fairly kept basic on the interior and didn't come with any power windows or a stereo system. Who needs music? Who needed music when you can just listen to the sweet symphony made by the naturally aspirated V12 motor in the back? But even then, the interior was way more modern and luxurious than any other previous Ferrari at that time, and ultimately, it had Enzo Ferrari's signature. To finish this video up, the Ferrari Enzo earned accolades where in 2004, the car became number 3 on the list of top sports cars of the 2000s by Sports Car International, and number 4 on the list of the top 10 greatest Ferraris of all time by Motor Trend Classic. However, Bloomberg described the Enzo Ferrari as one of the 50 ugliest cars of the past 50 years due to the design as discerned too over the top. On the other end of the spectrum were those that admire the beautiful ahead of the time design. Its design hinted at the looks of the supercars to come. The Enzo remains one of the most expensive collector's Ferraris today for millions of dollars. Even back when it came out, the Enzo was the most expensive Ferrari ever built for what it stood for. What made it truly unique was the fact that it was benefiting Ferrari's impressive winning streak in Formula 1. Enzo's dignity had to do with the memorable part of both Ferrari and automotive history because it celebrated Ferrari's first Formula 1 victory after the turn of the 21st century. The Formula 1 gearbox, along with other elements, carried that winning DNA, making the Enzo a jaw-dropping great machine. It isn't an ordinary car and is very self-explanatory. As special as the Enzo has come, when it comes to the history of special cars that have come off the Ferrari's assembly line with stunning looks and that prancing horse logo, the one bearing the name of its maker shines the brightest right here. It never lost its shine and still holds the crown from Maranello. The F1 looks of the mid-engine Enzo with some of the greatest upshifts and downshifts sounds ever to exit the exhaust pipes will leave an emotional sensation and a grin on your face. Does more really need to be said? Actually, yes. I forgot to mention that the Ferrari company introduced the Ferrari FXX, which is a high-performance track-only prototype that is based on the street-legal flagship Enzo Ferrari. Only 30 units were ever built and was launched in 2005 through 2007. And now, that is where we're going to wrap up for this Ferrari Enzo review. I hope you guys really did sit back and relax and enjoy this amazing video. And if you did, don't always forget to hit the subscribe button on my YouTube channel and hit the like button if you really did enjoy this video. And like I say, every video I put out, you are more than happy to give me any car suggestions in the comments down below. I'll be more than happy to review them, and I did not forget. Let's get inside of this beautiful Ferrari Enzo and virtually put the keys into the ignition and start the engine. Make sure to adjust your headphone volume for the amazing V12 note. Peace out, stay safe, Chris the Radar, out.